Otherwise, I'll use the name O1W. With this video, I'd like to help you become acquainted with the O1W by walking you through the basics, covering the subjects that new owners want to know about as soon as they get their new keyboard home. From my many experiences as a product specialist for KORG, I found that what most people want to know immediately is how to get around on the instrument, how to select sounds, how to sequence, how to set up combinations like keyboard splits and layers, how to set up the keyboard to work with an external sequencer or computer in multi-timbral mode, how to work with the effects, and how to use the disk drive. I want to keep this video as down-to-earth as possible instead of being technical, more in the manner of a personal training session. So I'll deal with the material in sections so you can go back and work on it one part at a time. Also, if I start to go a little too fast, you can always pause, stop, and rewind to go back over the material. You can control your own pace. I would also recommend that you have your new instrument plugged into the wall and running while you watch this video so that you can follow me as I go through different procedures. Now, let's get started. When you open the box for your new instrument, you'll find that it contains the O1W, a 3.5-inch floppy disk in the case of disk drive models, the power cord, and the owner's manual packet containing the owner's manual, a quick guide booklet, a program and combination voice name list containing performance information describing the 200 factory combinations, and your KORG warranty registration card. Make sure that you fill out your warranty registration card and send it to KORG immediately. This card not only establishes your warranty, but also gives KORG the ability to contact you with information on any future updates or products. The O1W can be hooked up a variety of ways. One way could be something as basic as your home stereo, hooked up running from the 1L and 2R outputs of the O1W into the left and right auxiliary inputs of your receiver using a stereo cord like this, with 1/4-inch plugs on one end and RCA male connectors on the other end. You could just as easily use a couple of small speakers with built-in amplifiers. This type of speaker is available at very reasonable prices. Simply hook the left output of the keyboard to the speaker on the left and the right output to the speaker on the right. You could also hook it up to a mixer, giving you more input channels, allowing you to use the additional 2 outputs of the O1W. The mixer could then be connected to a stereo amplifier, running to 2 monitor speakers. Also, don't forget the headphone jack. Headphones could come in handy late some night when you have a bad case of insomnia. Let's talk about how to load the factory disk. This disk contains the O1W's factory programs and combinations, including the global setup. It also contains all of the great factory demo sequences. Important, don't worry. People who are not used to newer technology sometimes worry that they might accidentally push a wrong key, slide a slider, or otherwise do something to break their new instrument. Yes, if you drop the O1W into a swimming pool or off a cliff, you could cause some damage. But any slip of your finger during some procedure might goof up what you're trying to do, but will not damage the instrument. In fact, you're always able to get the O1W back to the way it came out of the box simply by loading all data from your factory disk. It's a good idea to make a backup copy in case yours becomes damaged. There's another way to get back to square one, since all the factory data is stored as preload data in the global mode on page 7. So you see there's nothing to worry about. Now let's load the disk. Insert the disk into the drive, press the disk key. In the screen, you'll see the words Load All Data highlighted by the cursor. At the bottom of the screen is File A, also highlighted. Since you want to load all the data from File A, look over to the bottom right and see the word Load. Directly beneath Load is a cursor key, H. Push it. A screen will pop up asking, "Are you sure?" Push the cursor key under Yes, and the disk drive will start working. A red light will start flashing on the drive. When the light stops flashing, the viewing screen will change to show the word Completed. At that point, loading is finished. You're ready to go. The sequencer memory is loaded with 10 great demo sequences. If your instrument is an O1W or O1RW, your instrument came loaded with sequences. The procedure for playing them is identical. Press the sequencer key on the front panel. This will access the sequencer section in your display screen. A word of warning. Before playing any of these sequences, you should first adjust the volume of your playback system to a very low level. The reason for this is that the output of the O1W is very high. It's possible to accidentally damage your sound system, if not your own hearing, if you send too strong a signal through it. With your keyboard's master volume set at about 3/4 of the way up, bring your amplifier's volume up slowly and carefully to a comfortable, safe listening level. Now for the music. The demo sequences are already set up to play back in order, so all you have to do is press the Start-Stop key to start the music. There are 10 sequences in all, so sit back and enjoy them. The music will last for about 15 minutes. By making a backup of your factory disc, you'll learn the procedure for formatting and saving your own work. First, you need a blank disc. The O1W disk drive models use 3.5-inch double-sided, double-density discs. These discs are available everywhere at low prices. Buy a box of 10 and you'll be covered for a long time. Before we back up our information, in this case the factory disc, we must first prepare the new disc to receive it. We do this by formatting it. Formatting erases all the data on a disc and prepares it for the particular system that your instrument uses. To format a disc, do the following. Insert a new disc into the disk drive. Push the disk key. Press keypad number 2. This takes you to page 2, the disk save page. At the bottom left column of the display screen, you will see the words Format Disk. Move the down cursor key until Format Disk is highlighted. At the bottom right of the display is the word Format. Press the key directly beneath the word Format and the words Are you sure will appear with a yes and no box. Press the key directly beneath Yes. The screen will change to read Now Formatting. The disk drive will start to work and the red light will light up. This procedure will take a while. While this is happening, I'll explain exactly what data a disk can contain. One double-sided, double-density disk can contain 2 files, A and B. Each file can contain a complete load from an O1W FD consisting of 200 program sounds, 200 combination sound setups, 10 songs, global data containing drum kit setups, MIDI information, pedal assignments, and so forth, and system-exclusive data files, 64 kilobytes worth. You can actually use the O1W's disk drive to store programs from your other MIDI instruments. In other words, one disk with 2 files can hold 400 programs, 400 combinations, 20 songs, and 128 kilobytes of system-exclusive data files. Now let's get back to our formatted disk. When the disk drive stops whirring and the red light goes out, the formatting is finished. A little box saying Completed will appear on the screen. We're now ready to back up our disk. Since we have just loaded our factory disk, the data we want to save is already inside the O1W. All we have to do is save it. We're already on the Save page, number 2, so move the cursor to save all data. At the bottom of the page will also be highlighted File A. Since this is the first file we will save to this disk, File A is our choice. To the right at the bottom of the screen is the word Save. Press the key directly beneath the word Save and the process will begin. Note, never remove a disk while loading, formatting, or saving is in progress, since you could cause damage to occur. When the saving is complete, you will have finished backing up your factory disk. Label the disk and put it away. Important. As with all computer disks, be sure to keep them away from magnetic fields such as those found around speakers or transformers. These fields can damage the data on your disks. Directly below the master volume slider is the joystick. This small spring-loaded lever has many functions, but I'll outline just the main ones in this section. The most obvious use is for pitch bend. Pitch bend is used to simulate string bending on guitars and lipping up or down on brass or woodwind instruments. The left to right motion of the joystick for pitch bending is a technique that takes a while to master, but it can produce some very interesting musical effects. Another use of the joystick is to introduce pitch modulation, usually referred to as vibrato. Bringing vibrato in with a joystick by pushing it forward like this can be a useful tool for creating more realistic phrasing. Listen as I use the joystick on program A14, Allen's Run, for both pitch bend and vibrato. Another use for the joystick is when you pull it back towards you. A common use for this is to access other forms of modulation, such as amplitude or filter modulation. A good example of this is program A83, Flute. Notice when I hold down a note using this flute program and pull back on the joystick that I get a filter modulation similar to a flute vibrato. Finally, as I'll mention in other parts, the joystick can also be used as a controller for modulating effects. This is great. For instance, on program A09, Total Kit, while striking a snare sound, I can push the joystick forward and add more reverb to the sound. Listen to the difference. The joystick on the O1W is a versatile and indispensable musical tool. Back up and to the right of the joystick are the 8 mode select keys. At the top of the screen is the combination key. This key selects combination sound setups. These setups are combinations of individual sounds such as keyboard splits and layers or multi-timbral setups. There are 200 combinations available internally on the O1W in banks A and B. It's possible to access up to 200 more with a RAM memory card called the SRC 512. The next key is Edit Combi. Once you've selected a combination number, it's possible to use the Edit Combi key to access the parameters of that combination to set up your own personal preferences. The key below Combi is called Program. This is the key used to select individual sounds such as a trumpet, piano, or a set of drums. There are 200 programs available internally with another 200 possible using an SRC 512 RAM card. Now we come to Edit Program. This gives the user access to the broad range of programming parameters of the O1W, enabling one to create or edit sounds. Editing programs on the O1W is very similar in style to an old analog synthesizer, and it's not difficult to learn. The next key is called the Sequencer key. This selects the sequencer section. Next is the Global key. This takes the user into the global section. Next is the bank key, which switches through program and combination banks A and B for internal sounds and C and D for card sounds. Each bank on an SRC 512 card can contain 100 programs, 100 combinations, and 2 drum kits, or 7,000 sequencer MIDI events. On the O1W, there is a separate internal/card key as well as a bank key. Next, we have the disk key. This key accesses the functions of the disk drive. To the right of the mode select keys is a large section containing the backlit LCD display, the value slider and value up and down keys, and the cursor up and down and side to side keys. To the right are the page plus and page minus keys. The value slider and keys enable you to change the values of parameters one at a time with the keys or a large amount at a time using the slider. These controls are used with almost every editing change on the instrument. The cursor position keys enable you to move the cursor up and down and right to left. The page plus minus keys help you to move from page to page within each section of the instrument. You can also use the numerical keypad on the right to access page numbers. At the end of this section, we'll go through an exercise to help you become more comfortable using these keys. The numerical keypad has a tens hold minus key, a compare key, the record write, start stop, and reset keys. The numerical keypad works with everything. When you want to change a number value, simply move the cursor to the desired parameter, and while holding down the cursor key below, type in the desired value. Let's talk about the tens hold minus key. When this key is depressed, the program or combination group currently showing on the screen is locked in, like the 10s, 20s, and 30s. so that you can select any one of those 10 numbers simply by pushing the second digit of the desired number. It also functions as a way to enter a negative number value, such as -55. In sequencer mode, you can even use it to help select a track's program number to bank B. The compare key is a very helpful key. It can enable you to toggle back and forth between the original sound and its edited sound for comparison purposes. It can also act as an undo feature when sequencing. For instance, you just quantize the drum part to 16th note values. After you quantize the part, you want to compare it to the original unquantized part. Hit the compare key and you're back to the original. Another example would be if you had deleted an extra measure of a song by mistake. Hit the compare key and you have your data back. Finally, we come to the sequencer keys. The record write key switches the sequencer into record ready status. It's also used when editing programs and combinations, enabling you to write any changes into memory. The start stop key simply starts and stops a sequence. When you push the reset key, it resets the sequencer's measure counter to measure 1. Now we're going to do an exercise to apply the concepts we've just learned. Let's set ourselves up for this exercise by inserting a PCM ROM card set. We'll use the best of the M&T set, XST-1S. This set includes 2 cards, a performance data card and a PCM data card. Insert the performance data card face up into the slot beneath the writing on the top panel that says Program Sequence Data. Push the card in firmly until it stops. Now slide in the PCM card, also face up into the slot beneath the writing PCM Data. You have just added 100 programs, 100 combinations, 2 drum kits, and 2 megabytes worth of PCM samples to your O1W. There's also a demo sequence that can be accessed by switching to the sequencer mode and pushing the bank key. The sequence is on bank D. At this point, hit the start-stop key and the sequence begins. Now press the program key. If the sound you want is an internal sound, press the bank key so that you see an A or B at the top left of the program or combination number, such as A00 or B00. As I push the bank key, watch the screen as the bank letters change. You will notice also that since I have a program card inserted, the letters go through A, B, and C. C represents the bank of card sounds. On the O1W and O1RW, you have a bank key for switching banks and an internal card key for moving from internal to card. Now let's go shopping for some sounds. With so many program sounds, there's a numbering scheme that will help you find your way around. Programs and combinations are arranged in a certain numerical order by types with regard to the second digit of the number. Dramatic synth pad-like sounds end with 0. Keyboard instruments like electric pianos, clavinets, organs, and so forth end with 1. Brass instruments end with a number 2. Woodwind instruments end with 3. Guitars end with a number 4. Bell-like sounds end with 5. Basses end with a number 6. Strings end with 7. Some more synth sounds with a number 8. And finally, percussion and sound effects end with a number 9. Also, on the helpful side, KORG has provided little bank directories for every 10 programs and combinations. You can access them by pressing the desired 10's program digit. For example, press the bank key until the letter A shows. Now press the program key to access programs. On the keypad, press number 5. In the display, a mini directory pops up showing you the numbers and names of the 10 programs beginning with the digit 5. I'd like to hear what Blue Moon number 54 sounds like. It must be a form of guitar sound since the number ends with a 4. Since I've already pressed the first digit, number 5, all I have to do is press the second digit, number 4, and I can now play the Blue Moon program sound. If I want to move around the programs in the 50s, I could press the 10's hold key like this. Notice that a red light goes on in the key. And now I can press any of the single numbers to move around this section of programs. To get out of 10's hold, just press the tens hold key again. Another way to move around is with the value up and down keys. If the value up key is pressed, the program number will be increased by 1. The down key works in the other direction. Let's say that I want to select a program from the best of the M&T card set. I would simply push the bank key on an O1W model with a disk drive until the letter C appeared in the screen like this. On the O1W, I would press the internal card key to access the card. I can now select any of the 100 programs and combinations from the card. The procedure for moving through the combinations is identical. To choose combination setups, simply press the combination key and you're ready to go. Now let's get more comfortable with the cursor. First, select a program, say B01. We now have 8-foot piano. Let's go into Edit Program. Press the Edit Program key. We now find ourselves on page 0 of the Edit Program section. There are several pages to this section involving different display screens. We can select them by paging up using the page plus or minus keys. Push the page plus key once. Now we're on page 1. You see a little P1 at the top middle of the screen. Next to it is the title of the page, in this case, Emphasis Wave Shaping. Push it again. Now we're on page 2. You can see that each page has different information to work with. Now that we're on page 2, let's get in some cursor practice by moving around the screen using our cursor keys. The cursor is currently highlighting VDF cutoff. Using the cursor down key, move the cursor downward, one push at a time until it reaches EG time vel sense. Now let's move the cursor across the page to the right using the cursor keys below the screen. The first parameter to the right is AT0, which has to do with attack time. To move the cursor over to it, press the cursor key beneath this parameter. In this case, the key is E. Let me stop here for a second and put a spotlight on one of the features of this keyboard that I feel is extra special. I call this feature display cues. Notice that when you highlight a parameter in the screen, that words pop up in the top right-hand corner. For AT, you will see attack time. KORG has seen fit to provide these display cues to assist you in understanding the abbreviations. Always check the top right-hand corner for these helpful prompts that can be found in every mode of the O1W. To move to the next parameter, DT for decay time, push the next key to the right, F. Now let's do something with the value slider. First, with your cursor keys, move the cursor down and to the left at the bottom of the page and highlight ST98. This parameter involves slope time. Let's change the current number value to a lower number by moving the value slider down. If the slider is at the top of its track, you can reset it by moving it to the top and then moving it back down. Move the slider downward until it reaches the number 25. You'll notice that it gets a little touchy the closer you get to the number you want. A good idea is to switch over to the one number at a time value keys like I just did when you get close so that you can tap in the number more easily. Pause the VCR now and get some more practice moving the cursor around the page and changing values. It's really quite easy once you get the hang of it. By the way, you can't goof up the program by doing this since you'll not be writing these changes into memory. The rear panel is important since this is where you make all of your connections for hooking up to your sound system, other MIDI instruments or outside sequencers, as well as an electrical outlet. Facing the back of the rear panel to the far right is the stereo headphone jack. To the left, you will see 4 audio outputs. They're labeled 1L, 2R, 3, and 4. 1L and 2R usually act as the left and right stereo mix outputs. Outputs 3 and 4 are available for outputting specific sounds for external processing. Another use would be if you were to be playing live using a split keyboard setup with a bass sound in the left hand and a piano sound in the right. You could send the bass sound out of its own output to send it to a bass amp. There are also 3 pedal inputs, pedal input 1, pedal input 2, and damper pedal input. The damper pedal is sometimes called a sustain pedal. By the way, some manufacturers' damper or sustain pedals are wired with different polarities. If you find that your damper pedal is not working correctly, you can change the polarity inside the keyboard like this. Press the global button. Press the numerical keypad button, number 4, to access global page 4. At the top of the screen, you'll see damper switch polarity. If you wish to change polarity, use your value up or down button to change the value from minus to plus or vice versa, like so. Now back to the back panel. Inputs 1 and 2 can be used for a variety of functions such as MIDI control, program up and down, and volume. A complete pedal setup for the O1W would include 3 pedals. You would have 1 damper pedal, usually a KORG DS1 or PS1, a KORG EXP2 controller pedal, and a PS1 pedal switch. The EXP2 can function both as a switch for things such as changing program numbers up 1 or down 1, starting and stopping the sequencer, punch ins and outs with the sequencer, and as a continuous controller pedal for adjusting volume or changing effects. Next to your pedal inputs are the MIDI in, out, and through jacks. It's here that you connect MIDI cables leading to and from other MIDI devices. After the MIDI connections come the program and PCM card slots. KORG is well known for maintaining an extensive library of sounds for its products. These sounds come in 2 categories: program and PCM ROM expansion card sets and program combination cards. A program combination card contains new program sounds using the internal PCM samples on board the O1W. A PCM ROM expansion card set consists of 2 cards. One card contains 2 more megabytes of new PCM samples, and the second card contains 100 programs, 100 combinations, and global data, which contains 2 more drum kits. On the far right of the keyboard is the hookup for your power cord and the power on-off switch. So much for the back panel. Are you ever in a live playing situation where you'd like to just adjust the amount of reverb or maybe the octave of the sound that you're playing? That's where the powerful performance editing feature of the O1W comes in. This feature allows you to make this type of editing change without going into the main editing mode. There are 8 parameters that can be adjusted: octave, wave shaping amount, filter cutoff envelope, amplitude, attack, release, and effects amount. Here are a couple of examples. Octave up or down. Highlight the octave value at the bottom of the screen by pushing the cursor key directly beneath it. Key A. You will see the value 00. Let's play middle C and listen to the pitch. Now if I push the value up key once, the pitch of the note will move up 1 octave. The screen will read +1 for up 1 octave. If we hit the key again, the pitch will raise another octave. Now I'll bring the pitch back down, even below the original pitch, using the down value key. Notice that the slider actually moves upward and downward in the display. This is a quick way to transpose the keyboard up or down by octaves. The last one to the right is the dry effect balance. Notice that a little window pops up this time showing the effects used in the program. This parameter enables you to adjust the wet-dry mix of the effects in the program. Move the slider up and you hear more reverb and chorus. Slide it back down and the sound becomes drier and plainer. Performance editing is a great shortcut for changing your sounds during a live playing situation. Now, when somebody in the band tells you that there's too much reverb on your piano, you know how to back it off a little. There is also performance editing in combination mode. Press the combination mode key. Select combination A51, registers. Notice in the screen 8 sliders. These sliders act as volume sliders for any programs assigned to this combination. Looking at the bottom of the screen, we see that there are 3 organ programs assigned. Let's first play the organ sound. Now, press the key under timbre 1 to activate the slider. Move the value slider up and down. Now do this to the next slider. You can completely change the sound of the combination by varying the volumes of the programs used. Before we get started, I'd like to take a second to clarify just what is a sequencer. First of all, many people have not had the opportunity to use a sequencer and are unsure as to exactly what a sequencer is or what it does. For some, the O1W is their first sequencer. This is fortunate since it's a great one. A sequencer is very much like an old player piano. A roll of perforated paper travels through a mechanism in the piano. The holes in the paper roll correspond to notes on the piano. When the piano sees the holes, it plays the respective notes. What if you could take a new roll of paper with no holes in it and start it going through the piano mechanism? Start playing the piano, and as you're playing, the piano is punching the appropriate holes into the piano roll. A do-it-yourself player piano. At the end of your performance, you rewind the roll and start it going through the piano again. It would then replay the piano just as you had played it. That's how a sequencer works. But instead of punching holes in paper, it stores the note information into an internal computer. When you're finished and satisfied with your performance, the data can be saved onto a computer disk. Also, instead of one roll's worth of music, the sequencer can have many. They're referred to as tracks. Each track can address a different sound, not just a piano. The O1W sequencer has 16 tracks with the ability to have 16 separate instruments playing their different parts all at the same time. You have a lot of power at your fingertips. If you're using any of the O1Ws with an external sequencer, since there are 16 tracks, it is therefore 16-part multitimbral if used in song mode, and 8-part multitimbral if used in combination mode. By the way, the term multitimbral refers to the ability of an instrument to reproduce many different sounds at one time. When I say 16-part multitimbral, I mean that the O1W can actually have 16 different sounds playing 16 different parts at one time. Before we get started, it'd be a good idea to make sure that the sequencer memory is empty so that we have room for some of our own music. If you have an O1W disk drive model, you can clean out the sequencer simply by turning off your instrument and turning it back on. You lose your sequencer memory when the power is turned off. If you have an O1W or O1RW rack module, your instrument came loaded with sequences which are backed up with battery power. You'll have to erase all of the data using the following procedure. First, push the sequencer key. Since some of the data used in these songs is found in patterns, we should erase all patterns first. Let's go to the pattern page, number 7. Highlight Erase Pattern with a cursor. Pattern 00 is showing down here at the bottom left. If this pattern had data in it, you would see a box in the display stating where it is being used. No such box appears for pattern 00, so we'll run through pattern numbers, using the value up key until we find one that's being used. Pattern number 9 has a box showing that it is used in S4, which stands for song number 4, and is found on T2, which stands for track 2. Push the key below the word erase at the bottom of the screen and move on to the next pattern, pattern 10, which is also in use. Erase this too. Do this all the way to pattern number 99, and then it'll be time to erase all the songs. To erase songs, go to page 1 and 2 of each song and turn the memory protect parameters of all 16 tracks to off. I'll go through this procedure in song 0 now. You can repeat it on the remaining songs. Push keypad number 0. Select song 0 by holding down the key beneath it and pushing keypad 0. Release the key and push keypad 1. This is the track parameter page for tracks 1 through 8. Halfway down the page, you'll see the word on going across the display in 8 rows, which correspond to the first 8 tracks. Your display cue reads protect. This means that the memory for each track is protected. To unprotect the tracks, change the ons to offs by putting the cursor over the word and pushing the value down key once, just like this. Do this for all tracks on this page and on page 2. Now go to page 5, which is the Edit Song page. Move the cursor until it stops over the words Erase Song. At the bottom of the screen is the word Erase. Push the key underneath the word Erase, and Song 0 is gone. Do this for each of the songs in the O1W, and you'll have all of its sequencer memory available. Rather than run down a list of procedures with how-tos, I'm going to show them to you as I sequence so that you'll see them done in a natural order. The first thing we need to do is select a song. Move the cursor down to the left until you've highlighted Song 0. This is where you change songs. There are 10 song locations, and they can be changed by using value keys or by using the keypad. Next to the song number is track 1, which stands for the recording track number. There are 16 tracks, and this parameter is where you select them. We'll start recording on track 1, so we'll leave it as it is. Now for a sound for track 1. Let's go with some drums so that we can have a groove to play along with. Move the cursor to the top of the page all the way to the left, and you'll see track 1's program number. You'll notice that there are 2 rows of 8 program numbers. These are for the 16 tracks. For track number 1, I'll choose program number A09, Total Kit. Now we need to turn on the metronome. On the O1Ws, you have 3 choices for the metronome: off, on all the time, and on only while recording. Cursor down to the bottom where it says metronome off, M off. Check your display cue. It'll tell you what M stands for. To change it to on, hit the up value key. To change it to on while recording, hit the up value key again. This is where we want it. By the way, the volume of the metronome can be adjusted. Keypad to page number 9. Cursor down to metronome, and you'll see that there is an adjustment for the number of lead-in measures. Make sure it's set to 2 measures. Next is the level. Let's set it to 75. Now back to page 0. How about the tempo? Let's hit the record key and listen to the metronome to see how we like the tempo. Too fast. Let's turn it down. There, 100. Much more like it. Hit the record key again, and the metronome stops. Let's see. I'm going to be doing a drum part, so I think I'll record it as a pattern, like in a drum machine. Since I've already assigned the drum program to track 1, that's the sound I'll hear as I record my pattern. To create a pattern from scratch, go to the pattern page, page 7. Before we record, we have to choose a pattern number and give it a meter and a length. Cursor down to pattern parameter, and the bottom of the page gives us a setup. First, set the meter to 4/4. It's there. Then change the length to 4 measures. Now press the key below the word set to lock in your preferences. Now cursor back to real-time record, and at the bottom, set the quantize value to 16th notes. Since we've already turned on the metronome, it's also on in pattern mode. Also in pattern mode, you'll have the same number of measures counting off as you do in the track record mode. Now when I start recording, I'll have a 4-measure loop which I can add notes to every time it repeats, just like on a drum machine. Go into record, and here we go. Now that it's finished, I want to show you something. What if you accidentally hit a wrong note in the pattern and wanted to remove just that one mistake? I'll start the pattern recording, hit a crash symbol in the first measure, and show you how. As the recording continues, I highlight the word add and hit the value up key once. It changes to RMV for remove. Now I can hold down the key underneath remove and hold down the crash key just before it plays again until just after. There, I did it. Next time around, it'll be gone. It's gone. Very helpful. You can selectively do this. This feature also works in loop record mode. Now, let's copy the pattern onto track number 1. Keypad to page 6 and cursor down to Put Copy Pattern. At the bottom of the page, select pattern 00 to go onto track 1, starting at measure 1. Push the key underneath the word CPY, which stands for copy, and watch the measure number increase by a number of 4. Hit the key again, and the number grows by 4 again. 8 measures is what I want. Now back to page 0. Select track 2 to record on next. By the way, we have drums now, so we no longer need the metronome. Let's turn it off. Also, turn quantize back to high resolution. Now let's cursor up to the top and select an electric piano for track number 2. How about program A28? Syn Piano. It's a great program. Let's record an 8 measure long piano part. Hit the record key and then the start stop key. You'll now hear the metronome only during the count this time. Very helpful. When I'm done recording, I'll hit the start stop key again and it'll stop. Now for a bass part. Change the record track to number 3. Assign program number B66 fretless bass to track 3. Using keypad entry, first hit the 10's hold key to bring up the B bank and then punch in 66. Let's quantize the bass part as we play it in. This is called input quantize. Set quantize to an 8th note value since that's the busiest I intend to get. Now, everything I play will automatically be shifted to the nearest 8th note. Here we go. You know, it's hard to hear the bass because the piano part's too loud. Let's turn down the piano. Cursor over to Edit Program and change it to Edit Volume. Now all the tracks are showing their volume parameters. They're all set to 127, which is the highest they can go. Let's turn down the piano track, track 2, to 105 and see how it goes. 105. That's a lot better. Now it's time for me to make a big mistake. I'm going to make a mistake so that I can show you how you can fix your mistakes in event editing mode. First, for the mistake, set track record to track 4. Change edit volume back to program. Reset input quantize back to high. Set track 4 to program A13 alto sax. Hit record and start stop, and here we go for 8 measures. Now that's a great mistake. The mistake was played in the middle of measure 4. Now let's fix it. Go to page 5, the Edit Song page, and move the cursor to Event Edit. Since the track we were just on is track 4, the display at the bottom has already been set to track 4. There's a prompt at the bottom far right that says REC plus SS to start. This means that to enter Event Edit, we have to first push the record key and then the start-stop key. Here we are. Check out the screen. At the far left is the measure number. Next to the right is the event number of the measure, which is showing 000, with the meter 44 to the right. There's a meter value at the beginning of every measure. Value down, 1 tap to the first event. We see in column 4 that it's a bend. Remember I did a pitch bend on the first note? Look at all the pitch bend data as I move the cursor down, and here's the first note. Coming down. There it is. You even hear it when the cursor hits it. In the first column is the measure number, then the index number, then the location showing the beat and clock. Remember, each quarter note is divided into 96 clocks. Next to the right is the event, which in this case is a note, B3. Every note has a MIDI number. Next is the velocity at which the note was struck. Check this out. You can even hear the difference when you change velocities. Finally, we come to the length of the note. In other words, how long the note was held. All of these parameters can be adjusted in Event Edit mode. Now let's find our clunker. Cursor over to the measure number. We want measure number 4, so change it to 4. 1, 2, 3, right? Cursor through events in measure 4. And here's our mistake, a C-sharp 4. It should be a D4, so I'll highlight it and increase the value by 1 push. D4. It's fixed. Another way to change these notes is by holding down the cursor key below the highlighted note and tapping the right key on the keyboard like this. See how it changes as I change notes? Now back to the D4. By the way, now would be a great time to show you how to insert a program or control change. It's possible to have the program sound change in the middle of a track. I'm going to insert a program change halfway through the alto sax part so that it changes to a brass sound. First, I have to find a rest just before the second half of the phrase starts. That would be in the middle of measure 5. Move down to measure 5. The note B3 starts on beat 2 and 94 clocks. So I have to insert the program change just before it. By the way, you can't insert a program change as a program change. You have to do an insert that first appears as a note and then change it into a program change. What I'll do in this case is to highlight the note that will come just after the program change, B3, and hit the insert key. This will insert a note, a C3, just ahead of it. There you are. I can then change the note into a program change by highlighting it and running the value slider all the way to the top. It now says PAFT for polyphonic aftertouch. Using the value down key, I'll tap once and you'll see CTRL for control data. If I wanted this to be a volume control change, I could go over to the next row and insert the control number 7 and put in the value to the right. But instead I want a program change, so I change CTRL, one more tap, to PROG for program. The sound I want is B62 brass 2, so I'll choose that in the next column to the right. B62. Now I have to go over to the left, to the location column, and make it a little earlier than that B3 note so that they don't happen at the same time. Okay. I'm just going to change the location to 3 clocks earlier. Now let's exit Event Edit by hitting Start Stop and listen to see if our change worked. By the way, before I do this, look at the program number for track 4 and see if it changes at the right spot. It worked. You can use program changes as many times as you like to have an even broader range of sounds available for your songs. Event editing allows you to alter all of your information, change programs, do volume changes, and so forth and so on. Your manual covers this on pages 125 to 127. Here's an effects shortcut that allows you to put some basic effects into the song quickly. It's called Copy Effects. Go to page 9. Cursor down to Copy Effects All. We're going to copy the effect setup from a drum program, A09, so change the word at the bottom from song to program, and the program number from A00 to A09. Song to program, A09. Hit copy. Say yes. Now play the sequence. Hear the difference? I found that drum programs have good generic type effects for songs. Here's how to preset the meter of a song. Go to Song 1. Next to the measure number is a 4/4 meter. Hit the record key. The meter parameter turns into asterisks. Move the cursor over to where the 4/4 was, value up one at a time, and you will see meter options appear. Whichever one you leave in the display when you first record will be your meter. The step record feature is useful for many things. I use it for parts that I can't physically play, like drum rolls. I'll show you how. First, set up a new song with timpani on track 1. Let's see, oh, that's B39, I believe. B39. By the way, I've already copied the effects from program B39 by using the Copy All Effects feature outlined above. Go to page 5 and highlight Step Recording. Hit Record and then the Start-Stop key. In the screen you see the track number, the measure number, and beat clock location. At the bottom is the meter, note value, velocity, note length, and enter rest key. I want to do a sforzando roll that starts hard, goes immediately down to nothing, and builds up to a peak. Hit the B key, and I'll select 30-second note values. If I wanted a choice of dotted notes or triplets, I would hit the C key like this and change values. Here's your dots, and here's your triplets. I don't want to, so I'll go back to the little dash mark. 2 places to the right is the parameter for staccato and tenuto, where you can actually set the length of every note. Now I'll select the maximum velocity of 126 and hit a G3. Next, select the lowest velocity and hit the G3 twice again. Move the velocity key up a couple key punches, hit G3 again, and go through high velocities all the way to the top. With a few big bad 126s at the end. By the way, I could run the velocity slider up one more value beyond 126 and see the word key. This means that the velocity would go in at the velocity I played on the keyboard. Now hit the start key to exit, step record, and go back to page 0 and play it. A lot of people want to know about bouncing tracks. First of all, you can only bounce tracks down that contain the same program sounds, such as the same drum program. You can't bounce down a sax, a bass, and a piano to one track. A good way to do drums is to use several tracks and then bounce them down to one track. As an example, I have 3 drum tracks with the hi-hat on track 1, the kick and snare on 2, and the tambourine on 3. I want them all to end up on track 1. Go to page 5. Cursor to bounce track. Set the source track to 3 and the destination track to 1. Push the key beneath the word bounce and it's done. Now set the source track to 2 and leave the destination track to 1. Hit bounce again, and we now have everything on track 1 with the other 2 tracks automatically erased. I always like to keep one track in the sequencer open in case I want to bounce something later on. Quantizing takes your playing and corrects it for timing errors. For instance, you play in an 8th note hi-hat pattern. Being a human being, your technique might not be perfect. You could go back and quantize that part so that everything you played was shifted over to the nearest 8th note. I've recorded a 4-measure drum part and intentionally played with sloppy timing to show you how quantizing works. First, listen to the part. Now go to page 6 and highlight quantize. At the bottom of the page, select track 1 and set up measures 1 to 4 for the region to be affected. 1 to 4. Now set the quantize resolution to 8th notes, and while we're at it, move over 1 more to the right and set the quantize intensity percent to 90% so that it only brings the notes back in 90% of the way. We don't want to be too perfect. By the way, this percentage parameter is a new feature called soft quantize. Now, push the key under quantize for quantize. Hit the sequencer start key and listen to the drums now. They've been straightened out. What if I wanted to compare this to the original performance? I can hit the compare key and listen. Hit the compare key again, and we have the quantized version. Whichever way you leave it is the way that it'll stay. The next thing you record will lock it in permanently. Loop recording allows us to preset a region of measures which will repeat over and over so that we can work on just that section. It's similar to the way a pattern-based sequencer or a drum machine works. Each time the loop comes around, you can add more notes. This loop works on all tracks. I'll give you an interesting example which will not only illustrate loop recording, but will also show you another feature called copy combination. First, select a new song number. Press the combination key and select A69, fife and drum. Check this one out. I have a timpani down here, a bagpipe up here, a flute in here, and a snare drum roll at the top. This should be fun. Now, go back to the sequencer and hit page 9. Cursor over to copy from combination. Our combination name is showing at the bottom of the page and now can be assigned to tracks 1 to 8 or 9 to 16. We'll leave it at 1 to 8. Hit the key under Copy, say Yes, and our combination is in the song. Now go to page 0. Cursor over to the right to the Record Mode parameter where it says OVWR, which stands for Overwrite. Value up until you see Loop for loop recording. Next to Loop is the number for the loop start bar, which I'll leave at 1, and the loop end bar, which I'll set to 4 for measure 4. Turn on the metronome only while recording. Set quantize to high. Now we're ready to go for a 4-measure loop. Go into record and we're off. Loop recording is a powerful new feature in KORG sequencers. When you've completed a section of a song using Loop Record, you're able to copy it to other sections by using the Copy Measure feature and selecting all tracks. I have a little 4-measure song that I wrote using Loop Record mode that I'd like to copy to the next 4 measures, and I'd like to copy all tracks at once. First, here's the music. There it is, just 4 measures long. Go to page 6 and cursor to Copy Measure. At the bottom, change the source track parameter to all tracks. Next to the right, set the source measure to 1 and the source measure end to 4. Make sure that the destination track parameter is also set to all. Then set the destination measure to 5. Now hit Copy and it's done. We now have 8 measures. This is a major time saver. So far we've been choosing different programs and volumes for our tracks. Now it's time to talk about how to pan each track. Go down to the Edit parameter and change it to Pan. Now each track's panning assignment is showing. It's very important to understand how the panning works. Panning in the O1W enables you to assign different sounds to different effects and to position those sounds from left to right within the stereo field. This makes for a much more interesting mix. What's important to understand is that when you pan a track, you're not sending it to an output. You are actually sending it to an input or inputs of the effects processing section. There are 2 effects processors which can be accessed through 4 inputs, A, B, C, and D. This is tricky, and I would point you to page 49 in your owner's manual for more assistance. There are 3 basic effects placements you should understand: serial, parallel, and parallel to. By the way, you get a great diagram of each placement in your display screen by turning to the effects page, page 8, and highlighting the placement choice at the bottom like this. A box appears showing you the routings. Let's look at serial first. If you pan a track anywhere between inputs A and B in serial mode, that sound will go through effect 1 and then effect 2 and finally go out of outputs 1 and 2. There are 11 panning degrees left to right between inputs A and B. If you pan a track to input C in serial mode, that sound then goes through output 3 pan pot, which can then be routed back to A and B to be processed through effect 2. Check out the diagram. And then is sent to outputs 1 and 2. If output 3 pan pot were turned off, any track assigned to C would instead be sent directly to output 3 with no effect. The same holds true for input D and output 4 pan pot. There. Is that enough to burn out your brain cells? A lot of people don't take the time to learn about this extraordinary routing power. For those of you who are not interested in going this deeply into the effects section, I would advise you to stick with serial placement for sequencing and to copy the effects setup from one of the drum programs to use in your song setups. Let's change from serial to parallel. In parallel effects placement, effect 1 is placed after inputs A and B, and effect 2 is placed after inputs C and D. Any sound pan to A and B will only pick up effect 1, and any sound pan to C and D will only pick up effect 2. Sounds panned to C and D can still be panned back to the A and B side using output pan pots 3 and 4 so that they can be directed to outputs 1 and 2. This is handy in case you have no more inputs in your mixer. Once again, sounds assigned to C and D would go out of outputs 3 and 4 if pan pots 3 and 4 were turned off. Let's move up to parallel 2, the new kid on the block. I call this one the missing link effects placement because it fills in where the others leave off. In parallel 2, any sound panned to A and B will go through effect 1 and then out of outputs 1 and 2. Sounds panned to C and D will go through effect 2 but can be panned back to the A and B side for processing through effect 1 and then going out of outputs 1 and 2. For instance, you could pan an organ to C plus D to pick up a rotary speaker effect and pan it back to left and right to still be able to be processed through a reverb on effect 1. Everything else could be panned between A and B to just pick up the reverb. Now back to the song. You will notice that I have selected an ensemble hall for effect 1 and an exciter for effect 2. What's important to notice is that my effects placement is serial. Also notice that output pan pots 3 and 4 are routed back to left and right in A and B to be processed only through effect 2, the exciter. What this means is that any sound pan between A and B will go through the reverb and then the exciter. Any sound pan to C and D will only go through the exciter, missing out on the reverb. To save time, I have pre-panned the tracks and will explain to you what I did. Track number 1 is set to PRG, which means that I chose the panning in the original program. Understand that each oscillator in a program is separately pannable. Also, each drum in a drum kit is independently pannable. By choosing PRG, I'll get the individual pannings from the drum kit. Track 2 is the syn piano. I'll put it way to the left at 9-1. Track 3 is the mute guitar, and I'll pan it opposite of the syn piano for contrast. Track 4 is the B bass. I'll pan it to C plus D so that it will miss the reverb and only go through the exciter. I like my basses dry. Track 5 is the spit organ. I'll put it slightly to the right at 3-7. Track 6, the clarinet, goes to the left at 8-2. And track 7, the flute, goes opposite the clarinet at 2-8. This makes for a nice stereo image. While I'm at it, let me show you how to set up for a punch-in. Cursor down to record mode and change overwrite to auto punch-in out. Let's say that I want to replace a section of a track from measure 5 through measure 6. I'd set the record start measure to 5 and the record end measure to 6. I could put the sequencer into record at any measure before the punch. When it reaches measure 5, it'll start to record, and at the end of measure 6, it will switch out of record. If I'm not happy with the new part, I can hit the compare key and get my old part back. Obviously, I can't cover everything about the sequencer in a tape of this length, but I'd like to encourage you to read your manual. I'm sure that just going through the procedures on this video will make the manual a lot easier for you to understand. The combination mode of the O1W is very powerful. You can have up to 8 separate program sounds across the keyboard at one time in the form of splits, layers, and multi-timbral setups. In this section, I'll show you how to use the Edit Combination mode to create splits, layers, and even split layers. First, let's make a keyboard split. How about a bass in the left hand and a piano in the right? We'll choose a combination that we don't mind writing over. Let's choose A00, Dawn of Time. Now push the Edit Combi key, and we're in combination editing mode. The first thing that we should do is to turn off the effects of the current combination, since they're probably not good for the bass and piano split we intend to make. Push keypad 8 to take us to the effects page. Highlight the first effect, chorus 1, and move the value slider all the way up and all the way down. That'll set it to no effect. Do the same to effect 2. You're now listening to totally dry sounds, meaning they are not being enhanced by signal processing. Let's go back to page 0. Notice the 8 rows from left to right. They represent the up to 8 sounds or timbres you can assign to this combination. The top row allows us to assign a particular timbre to an internal sound. The screen would show the letters INT. An external sound showing the abbreviation EXT, such as a sound from another MIDI instrument, or be turned off showing OFF for off. Since we'll be using 2 internal programs, let's set the first 2 timbre locations to INT and the remainder of the timbre locations to off. The next row down is for selecting the MIDI channels for our timbres. Since the sounds we're looking for will both come from internal programs in the O1W and be played by the O1W's keyboard, we'll leave the MIDI channel set to channel 1. Bringing the cursor down one more level, we come to the program numbers for our sounds. We'll set up our bass first. With the cursor to the far left, over the program number for timbre 1, let's choose B66 for the fretless bass. B66. Now for the piano. Move the cursor one row to the right to the timbre 2 position and set the program number to A01. The bottom row of numbers applies to the volume setting for each timbre. For the time being, set both to 127. Let's go to the next page. Hit the page plus key, and we find ourselves on page 1, the second timbre page. The top row sets up the transposition of each timbre. Put the cursor over timbre 1, the bass sound. Let's play the bass sound to see if it allows us to have keyboard access to as full a range as possible of the notes on a bass guitar. It's in the right octave. It goes down to a C below an open E string on a bass. It'll work. We'll just pretend it's a 5-string bass. Go to timbre 2, play the piano. Let's say we'll be using the piano for rhythm mainly. If so, this is a good range for that. Since I'm using a 61-note O1 WFD, this is a decent compromise. If I wanted to move the piano timbre up an octave, I could type in plus 12 to raise the pitch by 12 half steps. Or minus 12 to go down by 12 half steps. Minus 12. Actually, I have a range of 24 half steps, 2 octaves either way. Let's set it back to 00 transposition. The second row, D for detune, has been set to -3 and +3 in the original combination. We don't need our instruments out of tune with each other in this case, so we'll set them both to 0. Move the cursor to the bottom row. This row handles the panning assignments of the individual timbres. In other words, how each sound is routed into the effects processors. On the timbres, set the panning to 5-5. This means dead center. Another use for panning in this case would be if we wanted to send the bass sound out of output 4 to run it through its own bass amp. There are a lot of options available, but due to time limitations, we'll set them to 5-5 for center way between A and B. Page up to page 2, the Windows page. It's here that we can decide where the sounds are positioned across the keyboard and how much keyboard force it takes to cause a sound to be heard. To explain velocity windows briefly, a sound could be assigned to the keyboard and set up in such a way that you wouldn't hear it unless you struck the key with a pre-programmed degree of velocity, say 100. The tone generator reads every note struck and chooses to respond or not to respond. Any note hit with a velocity of less than 100 would simply be ignored if the bottom velocity window were set to 100. The opposite holds true for the top velocity window. A sound struck over the top velocity value would be ignored. This feature gives us some unique abilities that run into more advanced areas. Sometime when you get a chance, check out some examples of velocity switching in combinations such as A06, A11, and A59. Play the keyboard very softly and then hit it hard. Listen to the difference as sounds come in and disappear. There are a lot of combinations that use these velocity windows. Check them out on the Windows page to see how they're set up. In our current combination, the top row reads 127 and the next row reads 001, so both timbres are already set to respond to any and all velocity values, so we'll leave them alone. The next two rows concern themselves with key windows. In other words, where the sounds are found across the keyboard, bottom keys to top keys. When we move the cursor down to the third row, a window appears showing us a diagram with the keyboard at the top and 8 horizontal bars below. These bars each represent one of the up to 8 sounds you could assign across the keyboard. The length of each line visually indicates where the timbre is found across the keyboard. Timbre 1 is the top line, timbre 2 is directly beneath it, and so on. In the previous combination, which we are in the process of changing, the key window tops and bottoms were C-1 to B3 for timbre 1 and C4 to G9 for timbre 2. If you're new to MIDI, all of the notes in MIDI keyboards have a note number, C-1 for the lowest key and G9 for the highest key. There are actually 127 MIDI note numbers. With the O1W, we only have 61 keys, but transposing the keyboard up or down actually gives us the option of accessing even more keys up or down. Changing a key window setting is easy. I'd like to have the bass guitar available all the way up to C4 instead of B3. Let's make sure the cursor is over timbre 1 on the third row down for key window top. Since I want to change the note value from B3 to C4, a difference of only one note, I can just hit the value up key once and I have the right key window top. Another way would be to hold down the cursor key directly below the timbre in question and tap the keyboard note of your choice. It's that simple. As you change the key window note values, you also see the respective timbre's horizontal line change its length on the screen. Unfortunately now, we have the bass and piano both playing on the note C4. Let's have the key window bottom of the piano be C#4. Move the cursor over to timbre 2 and down one row to the key window bottom value. It's showing C4. Change it to C#4. Now let's play both sounds and make sure that the split is to our liking. This will work out fine. Let's move to page 3, the MIDI filters page. On the MIDI filters page, the top row is for allowing or disallowing a timbre to respond to MIDI program changes. This doesn't apply in this case, so we'll move the cursor down to the second row and you can decide whether to allow a timbre to respond to control changes such as pitch bends, MIDI volume, and so forth. In this case, both are set to respond to control changes, which is fine with me. We'll leave it alone and move on. Set the cursor to the third row down for the damper pedal. Let's set this one up. With the cursor over timbre 1, the bass, set the value to X, which means that the bass will not be affected by the damper pedal. Now put the cursor over timbre 2, the piano, and set the value to 0. It's already there. The piano will now respond to the damper pedal, but the bass won't. I'll play a little bit to show you how it works. Move the cursor down to the bottom row. This row is for allowing or filtering out aftertouch. Aftertouch refers to downward pressure on a key after striking it. It's used to bring in effects such as vibrato for phrasing purposes. Since some bass players use vibrato, we'll make it available to our bass sound, but not to the piano. Put the cursor over timbre 1, the bass, and select 0 to say yes. Then move the cursor over to timbre 2 and select X to say no. Now let's go to the effects page, page 8. The setup on page 8 looks fairly simple. At the top of the page is FX1. This is where we'll make our choice for effect 1. Tap the up value key to start moving through your effect options, playing the piano sound as you make changes. You'll go through hall, ensemble hall, concert hall, and so on until you've gone through 47 choices. For our purposes, choose number 2, ensemble hall. Playing the piano, you might think that there's too much reverb. We can change this. Move the cursor to the far right of the window and down to where you see the number 7030 for the dry effects balance. Let's change this value to 7822 so that we can hear more of the original dry signal and less of the reverb. Also, cursor over to the far left to the number 2.8, the value for reverb time. Let's set up a shorter reverb time, 2.2 seconds. Now let's cursor down and set up effect 2. Let's choose the exciter, effect 28. It's a nice effect that I use a lot. It tends to add clarity and crispness to the sound by emphasizing or de-emphasizing certain frequencies. It doesn't sound quite right to me, so I'll cursor down and over to the parameter that reads EP for emphatic point and move the values up and down while playing a note over and over. Hear how the affected frequencies change? I like it when it's set to 01. You'll notice that all of the 01W's effects have many parameters to adjust, not just a couple. There are 47 professional quality effects that can add a special sound character to everything you use them for. Spend some time studying the effects section in the manual. Remember, you can afford to experiment with sounds since you have a factory disc that will reload all of the original settings. At the bottom left section of the screen is showing serial effects placement. That's what we want. You will also notice that output pan pots 3 and 4 are panned back to A and B inputs. Referring to the diagram, any sound panned to C and D is panned back to A and B so that it only receives the exciter and no reverb. This would be great for the bass. Let's go back to page 1. Move the cursor over to the bottom far left over 5.5, which is the current pan position for the bass program. Change the value to C and D. You'll notice that the bass no longer has reverb and sounds louder. The piano was panned through A and B and thus is going through both the reverb and the exciter. We did all this using only 2 outputs. Now let's give our combination a name and write it into memory. Go to page 9. Cursor down to Rename Combination. A window pops up showing all the characters at our disposal. At the bottom left of the page is the name of the old combination, Dawn of Time, with the cursor over the first letter D. To the right of the name are the words INS for insert and DEL for delete. Insert enables you to add the same character over and over by pushing the key multiple times. Delete lets you delete a letter. To the far right are the left and right cursor keys for moving from side to side in the name. The new name is going to be Bass Piano. First, move the cursor over the first letter in the Dawn of Time. Push the delete key enough times to get rid of all letters. Now, using the value slider and keys, move the letter cursor to an uppercase B. Arrow to the right for the next letter A. To select letters, use the value slider and keys. Every time you enter another letter in the name, move to the next letter spot using the right cursor arrow. Complete this exercise and we'll be ready to write our combination into memory. Now that we have the right name, let's write the program. Move the cursor back up to Write Combination. At the bottom right of the window is the word Write with A00 next to it. We'll write the combination to this location, A00. Press the key underneath Write, which happens to be F, and the prompt comes up, Are you sure? Hit the key beneath the word Yes, and we have written our first combination. Hit the Combi key to exit from Edit Combination to see the new name, Bass Piano. Making a layer in a combination is handled in the same way as a split, except that the key windows would be the same for any sounds that you want to play from the same key. Let's have some strings to layer over our piano. Go back into Edit Combi and go to page 0. On the third timbre, turn off to INT. Move down and change the program to A07. Go to page 1. Everything here looks all right. No weird detunes or pans. Next page. Set the key window to be identical to the piano. G9 on the top and C# on the bottom. Nice sound. Now I'm going to show you something that might cost you some money. How'd you like to be able to use a controller pedal to adjust the volume of the strings? Here's how. Go to page 3. Cursor down to the second row for controllers and put an X for the bass and piano and an O for the strings. Next, go to the global mode and select page 4 for pedals. Select Assignable Pedal 2 and change Program Down to Volume. Go back to Edit Combi, push the Record Write key, and rewrite the combination. Now here's where the money comes in. To accomplish this, you need a KORG EXP2 controller pedal. It looks like this. Plug it into Pedal 2 input, and look what you can do now. We have also just created a split layer. Inside your owner's packet came the O1W voice name list. It includes all of the program names as well as all of the combination names. Along with the list of combinations comes a brief description of the performance information for that setup. It tells you things like if it's a split, a layer, or a split layer, and whether the effects are programmed for dynamic modulation. Study this carefully and don't be afraid to go into the edit mode to check out how some of these combinations were created. Now I'd like to talk about multi-timbral use with an external sequencer or a computer with sequencing software. First of all, let me explain to you that the O1W can function two different ways multi-timbrally. By the way, multi-timbral means that an instrument can play multiple sounds at once on different MIDI channels. In combination mode, it can receive on 8 MIDI channels. In song mode, it can receive on 16 channels. Setting up an O1W combination for multi-timbral use with an external sequencer or a computer with sequencing software would involve the following procedure. Push Edit Combination and go to page 0. At the top of the screen are the timbre mode values. Some are set to internal and some to off. Highlight each one with a cursor and set them all to internal. The next row down is for assigning MIDI channels. Assuming this is your only piece of gear, I would assign channels from 2 to 9 going across the page. I would reserve MIDI channel 1 for the global MIDI channel. Using the global MIDI channel, you could send a program change to the O1W, which would select the combination number used for the song with its own special effects. Then, on all the other 8 MIDI channels, other program changes could be employed throughout the song. To set the channel, simply cursor to each timbre, hold down the button beneath it, and hit the keypad number for the MIDI channel you want. The next row down is for assigning program numbers. This is self-explanatory. Each timbre can receive program changes on its own MIDI channel. The bottom row is for volume. Since the O1W receives MIDI volume messages on all individual channels, you can control volumes through the sequencer. Page 1, the timbre page. Set all transpositions to 0, set all detunes to 0. Pan all timbres anywhere you like. Page 2, the window page. All velocity window tops should be 127 and all velocity window bottoms should be 1. All key window tops should be G9 and all key window bottoms should be C-1. Page 3, MIDI filters. Set all filters to 0. Each timbre should be able to receive everything. Page 8. Here you can set the effects for this song, including effects placement routings. Page 9. The right page. Give the combination the name of the song and write it into memory. If your sequencer has a feature that is called echo back, echo through, or play through, you must of course turn local off by going into the global mode, page 0, cursoring down to local control, and setting it to off. The other way to run the O1W multi-timbrely is in song mode. Simply push the sequence button and call up a song number. Your 16 tracks become the 16 timbres. You can assign any MIDI channel to any track on pages 3 and 4. Timbre volumes and panning can be done on page 0 or through MIDI using MIDI controller data. Needless to say, each of the 10 songs can have their own effect settings. With all the buzz about keyboard controllers these days, you'll be happy to know that you have a great one. All O1W keyboards can transmit on up to 8 MIDI channels at once. This is done in combination mode. Select combination O1. Go into Edit Combination. On page 0, we can set each of the 8 timbres to trigger either an internal sound, an external sound, or both. If we set a timbre to external, like this, we could go down one row and set it to any MIDI channel. Any external instrument set to that MIDI channel could be played by the O1W. You could even send a program change to it by going down to the next row and selecting a program number. Then you could go down to the next row and set up the right volume for it in your setup. Next, on page 1, you could send a keyboard transposition to it from the top row. Next page, you could choose a top and bottom velocity window for this timbre and a key window top and bottom so that you could choose where the sound could be played from your keyboard. Next page, you could decide whether or not this timbre will respond to program changes, control changes, a damper switch, or aftertouch. Don't forget, you have 8 timbres to choose from. Pretty powerful. More powerful than many keyboard controllers that can't make a sound or even sequence on their own. KORG's instruments are known for having the highest quality effects processors. I could use a full videotape just to explain the O1W effects section, but due to time considerations, I'll just touch on some of the basics that you should be aware of. The 47 effects in the O1W are dynamically controllable through MIDI. This means that you can alter the effects using MIDI controllers such as aftertouch, velocity, moving the joystick, pushing a pedal, and so forth. I'll give you a couple of examples to whet your appetite. Select program B21 CX3 organ. If you push the Effects Performance Edit button, H, a screen will pop up telling you that this organ program has a rotary speaker as one of its effects. To the right of the words rotary speaker under the heading D mod for dynamic modulation is written S plus AFTT. This stands for slider and aftertouch. This means that you can cause the rotary speaker to go from slow to fast speed by using either aftertouch or by moving the value slider up or down. Push the cursor down button once to get our display back to normal. Now let's try working with our rotary speaker. First, I'll hold some notes down and then press downward on the keyboard. The speaker speeds up. When I release some of the pressure, the speaker returns to the slow speed. Now, I'll hold the same chord and move the slider to the top of its track, and the speed will get faster. When I move the slider back down, the speed slows down too. You could also program it so that the speed could be changed by using a foot pedal. Another quick example is a drum kit. Let's choose B09, Mr. Producer. Find a good sounding snare drum and tap it. While tapping it, take the joystick and push it forward. Listen as the reverb gets louder. Release the stick and the reverb goes back to normal. Dynamic modulation of effects through MIDI is a very powerful tool. To choose an effect, go to page 8 in Edit or Song mode and highlight either effects processor. Tap the value keys up or down until you have your choice selected. If you know the effects number, you can use the keypad. Select program B09, Mr. Producer. For effect number 1, change to effect 13, stereo delay. Cursor down to the next row on the left and you'll see L250. Your display cues are especially helpful while working with effects since there are so many small parameters to work with. First, to allow our effects changes to stand out a little more than usual, set the dry effect balance on the right to 50-50. Now cursor to the far left. L250 stands for left channel delay in milliseconds. Set it to 150. Now set the right channel's time to 300 and tap some notes. Now set the left to 300 and the right to 500. Next is F for feedback. This refers to the number of echo repeats. Set it to 0 and play some notes. Now set it to 90. A little feedback goes a long way. Next, HD stands for high frequency damping, meaning how bright or dull the echoes are. Set it to 0 for no damping. They sound just like the original. Now set it to 99. The echoes will be duller sounding. Next is a digital EQ that allows you to adjust the amount of high and low frequencies. The final parameter for this effect is for the dry effect balance. This controls how much of the original unprocessed sound is heard in relationship to the effect. Pull your value slider down all the way and the sound will go dry. Increase it and the ratio will change as the effect becomes stronger. There's no way I have time on this tape to go through each effect, but I did want to go through one and show you the general procedure of editing them. Don't be afraid of effects. They have the ability to help make your music sound even more special. Remember, with two separate digital effects processors, each with a menu of 47 dynamically controllable effects, you have the most powerful and versatile sound processing available in a workstation today. One other thing, the effects page is always page 8 on the O1Ws, whether you're in program edit mode, combination edit mode, or song mode. Hopefully, what's done with regard to effects on this tape will inspire you to study the effects pages in your owner's manual, pages 49 through 83. It's possible that I could go more into detail on effects with the next O1W video. Without getting too technical, I'd like to expose you briefly to wave shaping. The good news is that this new technology is something that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out. It's easy and fun to experiment with. Select program A26, Res Bass. Some of you who have programmed analog synths before will think that you're hearing filter resonance. Wrong. Believe it or not, you're hearing the effects of wave shaping. Let's push the Edit Program key to access the parameters of this sound. On page 0, you'll see that it's a double oscillator program using two waveforms, an electric piano waveform and the electric bass 3 multi-sound. Now go to page 1. At the bottom of this page, you see WS1 equals 45 reso. This means that a wave shape called reso has been applied to oscillator 1 to alter its harmonic content. To the right of the page is a window showing the shape of a 3-stage envelope. The display shows how the effect of this wave shape changes over time. As I play this sound, listen as I first adjust the start level, then the decay time. Not too complicated, is it? Here's one more quick example. Push the program key and select A01 16-foot piano. Now push the Edit Program key and move the cursor down to the writing that says 000 A piano. This refers to the PCM data of the O1W's acoustic piano. Now take the value slider and move it all the way to the top. It should now say 254 sine, which means the sound source is now a sine waveform. Listen to the new sound. Page up to the next page. Move the cursor over to WS1 equals off. While you're tapping a note on the keyboard, use your value up key to change the wave shapes that are being applied to the sine waveform. What a difference. Experiment with the start level, decay time, and sustain level. One other thing, there are 255 PCM waveforms in an O1W. With a menu of 60 wave shapes that can be applied to these waveforms, the possibilities are limitless. Wave shaping is powerful, fun, and compared to some synthesizer technologies, easy. Take some time to experiment with wave shaping. The global mode covers the utility parts of the O1W. On page 0, you can adjust the contrast of the display screen. You can adjust the tuning of the entire instrument up or down. You can transpose the keyboard up or down an octave either way by half steps. This is great in case some singer comes up and wants you to play a song in an impossible key. On this page you can also set the global MIDI channel, for the O1W. Switching back and forth from internal to external clock is found here, along with local on and off, and MIDI filtering. It's here that you could tell the O1W not to receive aftertouch data when sequencing, since aftertouch eats up a lot of memory. This is especially important if your keyboard is the O1W or O1RW model with a sequencer memory of 7,000 events. Simply cursor down to aftertouch and set the value to DIS for disable. The next 2 pages are for the drum kits. There are 2 drum kits on each bank, A, B, and card banks. There are 60 percussion sounds per kit, each assigned to keys. First, call up program A09. Depress Edit Program. On page 0, we are told that drum kit number 1 is being used. Now go back to Global and choose drum kit A1. Move the cursor down to O1 and follow along. The number 000 stands for the percussion sample number, which applies to fat kick. Listen. It's found on key number C2. Next over, I can tune it up or down by using the data entry slider. Next to the right, I can adjust the volume of this kick drum the same way. I can also adjust the decay of the sound. You can't tell it too well on a kick drum, but you can on a crash cymbal or tom-tom. Next is the panning. I can put it wherever I want it. Panning can be used to access certain effects. Refer to effects placement in the sequencer section. The last parameter deals with exclusive groups for things like hi-hats, where one sound shuts the other off, like this. Let's scroll down to the hi-hat to see how it's set up. The regular hi-hats are on exclusive group 1, and the synth hi-hats are on exclusive group 3. There are 9 exclusive groups to assign percussion sounds to. Page 3 is where you have a choice of keyboard scales, such as equal temperament, pure major, pure minor, and even a user scale. Page 4 is for pedals, for adjusting velocity and aftertouch curves, and for memory protect. Page 5 is for loading from an SRC 512 card. Page 6 is for saving to an SRC 512 card. You'll probably end up owning at least one SRC 512 card, so let's go over what to do with it when you get it home. When you're ready to use the card, the battery must first be inserted. Make sure that the card's protect switch is set to off. If you're wanting to save all combinations, programs, drum kits, and other global data, insert the RAM card, making sure that you insert it face up. Press the global key, go to page 6, using the keypad to get you to the card save page. Make sure that Save Combi Programs is highlighted by the cursor. At the bottom of the page, you should see bank A plus B with an arrow pointed to bank C plus D. C plus D refers to the card banks. To the right is the word Save. Press cursor key G underneath Save. A box will appear asking if you're sure. Press the key underneath Yes. Both banks are now saved. Very important. A bank can have either programs, combinations, and global, or 7,000 sequence events stored. Not both. One bank could have programs, combis, and global, and the other bank could have sequences. To save your sequencer memory, move the cursor down to save all sequence, and at the bottom of the page, select either bank C or D. Push the key underneath Save. Now press the key under Yes. It's that simple. Page 7 is for loading the preload data. This is where you can reload your entire machine with the factory programs, combinations, and drum kits. The procedure is self-explanatory. Page 8 is the data dump page. Another way to store the internal memory of an O1W is through a MIDI data dump. This procedure sends the O1W's data for programs, combinations, global setups, and sequences to another device, usually a computer, a hardware sequencer, or a MIDI data filer. This information can then be saved to a disk. To dump MIDI data from the O1W, you must first prepare the external device to receive the information. You'll have to consult the owner's manual of that device to find out how. Obviously, the MIDI out of the O1W must be connected to the MIDI in of the other device. On the O1W, press the global function key, press keypad 8, and choose the type of data you wish to transmit by highlighting with the cursor. When you've made your selection, press the G key underneath the word dump, and a box will pop up with the word processing, indicating that the procedure is taking place. When the box disappears, the dump is complete. You can dump all programs, all combinations, all drum kits, the global mode, all sequences, or simply everything in the machine at once. Well, that's about it. I hope this video has been a help to you. One thing, don't let this video keep you from reading your owner's manual. With the basic understanding I hope you've gained from watching this tape, the manual should be a lot easier to understand. There is obviously no way that I could cover everything about the O1W in one videotape. I'm planning on producing a second tape to go into more depth on this keyboard, and I would appreciate knowing if you would be interested in such a tape. I would also like your input with regard to what topics you would like to have discussed at greater length. If you're interested, please fill out the enclosed form and mail it to me. I'll take all suggestions seriously. Also, don't forget KORG USA's excellent product support department. There are several well-trained experts waiting to assist you with your KORG products. Dial 1-516-333-USER and get direct access to KORG's Product Support Center. Thanks for watching.